Discover the incredible moment a single dad CEO transformed a hurtful joke into an inspiring love story of resilience and redemption. Steve sat in the boardroom, the heavy rain pounding against the glass, a perfect match for the storm brewing inside him. Just moments ago, his colleague, Matt, had delivered a flippant remark about single dads, triggering a wave of laughter that echoed in the polished space. "They're all doomed to fail at one or the other," he had joked, careless. A cut. A wound that throbbed. And the laughter? It bore down on Steve like a lead weight, igniting a fierce determination hidden beneath the surface of his composed exterior. The visceral sting coiled deep within him, igniting memories of sleepless nights spent ensuring his son Jake felt loved and cared for. The truth was complicated. At 38, Steve was a thriving CEO, the kind of man who commanded respect in every corner of the tech world. But behind the accolades, societal expectations loomed large and taunting. Here he was, a single dad, trying to reconcile his ambition with family life. The work to build something unprecedented seemed essential. He had inklings of ideas worth pursuing, innovations that could elevate his company. Yet the quiet whispers of judgment suffocated his momentum as he grappled with the heavy weight of the world's perceptions. But he had a plan. An awestruck vision of what his groundbreaking project could mean not just for the business but for fathers everywhere. The thought propelled him through sleepless nights, his fingers furiously typing away while Jake snuggled in the next room. Their shared laughter rang through their apartment, a melody that sometimes dulled his gnawing guilt, the nagging fear that he was chasing success at the cost of his son's happiness. Yet, every family dinner deteriorated into something hurried, something unrecognizable, and Steve's resolve began to fray at the edges. Each day, Jake's questions grew sharper, the innocent inquiries of a child illuminating a painful truth. "Dad, why are you always busy?" Even in moments of laughter, the weight of his dual identity, the tireless CEO and devoted father, felt at odds. And then, the day came when everything began to unravel. It was a damp Wednesday evening when Steve returned home to find Jake sitting in silence. "Dad," Jake whispered, his usually bright eyes clouded, "the kids at school said you're not a real dad because you're a single parent." Each word was a dagger, twisting painfully in Steve's gut. He felt gutted raw, as he recalled the relentless stereotypes born out of ignorance and fear. Desperation surged through him. Trying to confront the bully's parents felt like a noble fight, but instead spiraled into hostility. They misunderstood, pointing fingers at Steve instead of accepting their children's wrongs, and in that moment, the isolation of single parenthood crashed over him like a fierce wave. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Steve sat at his desk, a flurry of conflicting emotions swirling. Should he retreat from the fire of ambition for the sake of Jake? Or was there a way to redefine the narrative? That joke, once a punch to the gut, now ignited a flicker of hope. What if he could create a campaign highlighting the strength of single-parent families? Just when he thought he seized upon the answer, whispers of doubt echoed through the office. Expectations loomed. He stood alone, the dim light from the computer casting shadows of uncertainty over him. Should he risk it all, dignifying the love that defined fatherhood with his proposal? Or withdraw to retain a sense of stability amidst chaos? The storm outside raged on, mirroring the tempest in his heart, leaving him breathless, his mind racing with the magnitude of the decision that could alter the course of their lives forever. Steve's fingers hovered over the keyboard as uncertainty washed over him. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum, amplifying the conflict churning within. He had built this company from the ground up, pouring in years of hard work and late nights, yet here he was, grappling with the shadow of societal scorn. He envisioned his proposal a campaign focused on showcasing the resilience of single fathers, but those visions were tinged with doubt. In a world predicated on traditional notions of success, Was he setting himself up for failure? As he recalled Jake's crushed expression, a different kind of determination surged within him. Steve had always prided himself on being a fighter, yet now, it felt as if he was battling against invisible forces: cynicism, stigma, the very machinations of a culture that doubted fathers like him. What if he framed his campaign as something larger? Not simply a defense of single fathers, but as a celebration of parenthood as a whole, regardless of structure. He opened a new document, the blank screen a canvas for his thoughts. Can you be a father if you're a single parent? The question hammered at the core of his mission. Each idea he typed was a direct challenge to the narrative Matt had casually dismissed. For each painful jab aimed at the single dads, Steve would present success stories of their strength, their perseverance. They were not failures. They were warriors navigating life's tumultuous waters, balancing work and love while fostering dreams in their kids. The rain outside subsided, and the gray clouds seemed to part momentarily, illuminating his workspace. Inspiration struck. He could host a series of interviews with prominent single dads, men who had overcome their own challenges to create beautiful lives for their children. This could be transformative not just for his business, but for him personally and for fathers who felt like he did, isolated in their struggle. His heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. What if this campaign not only honored single fathers but galvanized the broader community to reconsider their prejudices? To view fatherhood through a lens of compassion and respect rather than dismissiveness? Steve found himself typing rapidly, thoughts flowing as if guided by an unseen force, plotting everything from logistics to potential partnerships. Realization began to dawn on him: the innovation he sought might center not on technological advances, but on emotional connection and advocacy. He could leverage the company's resources into a heartfelt movement fueled by stories of resilience. Yes, it would be risky, perhaps even precarious. Would investors see the vision or brush it aside as an emotional ploy? The prospect sent tremors through him. Exhaling slowly, Steve allowed a moment to breathe, weighing the enormity of his decision. He envisioned stepping into that boardroom again, facing the laughter not with defeat but with an empowering narrative that shattered stereotypes. Could he truly transform fear into something beautiful and strong? Jake's innocent voice echoed in his mind again. Why are you always busy? What if he could finally design a life where work and fatherhood were no longer intertwined burdens but harmonious chords of growth? As he glanced back at the dimly lit boardroom, resolve tightened in his chest. The moment to confront those doubts was nearing. The campaign could redefine not only his relationship with Jake but also the way countless fathers perceived their journeys. Suddenly, the phone rang, jolting him back to reality. It was his business partner, Clara, with an urgent request that disrupted his flow of thought. "Steve, we've got a big investor meeting tomorrow. They're interested in the latest tech project." He hesitated, grappling between the pull of urgency and the weight of his newfound aspiration. The time had come to decide: play it safe and focus on traditional expectations, or step out boldly, risking everything for a cause he believed in. He let the thought hang, a pivotal moment fraught with tension, as he contemplated his next move in a world that seemed intent on belittling him. Steve closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the weight of Clara's words press against his chest. The apprehension of what was at stake loomed larger than the excitement of his vision. Interest from an investor could secure the future of his company, but was it a future he wanted if it meant sacrificing his authenticity? He launched into a mental debate, weighing the benefits of collaboration against the necessity of self-expression. The prospect of affirming to Clara that he could juggle both worlds, a traditional business approach and an emotional campaign, was tantalizing. Yet, it required a staggering leap into the unknown. With a steely resolve, Steve most urgently realized that he needed both the technical project and his groundbreaking campaign. Could he marry them in a way that didn't dilute either vision? Perhaps the tech project could subtly support the campaign, leveraging digital platforms to reach a broader audience. He felt a flicker of strategic inspiration igniting within him. The sound of the keyboard filled the silence as he began drafting an email to Clara. He outlined his ideas, articulating how they could integrate their technology with his narrative. His fingers danced across the keys, typing fast and furiously. This was more than an idea. It was a manifesto, a vision that could redefine both professional hustles and personal truths. Once the email was sent, Steve leaned back in his chair. Exhaustion tugged at his eyelids, but he felt invigorated, the thrill of creation coursing through his veins. He could picture the responses he might get, the excitement from entering both worlds instead of remaining constricted by one. But doubt began to creep back, and what if investors only saw the emotional pitch as a distraction? What if their laughter echoed again, not in amusement but in derision? The ghosts of Matt's condescension loomed, their whispers promising failure. He resolved to face them with a smile, ready to transform those taunts into opportunities. The cringeworthy moment of doubt was not wasted, it became a call to action. The next morning, Steve arrived at the office earlier than usual. Before him lay a multitude of tasks, but one command dominated the need to prepare for the investor meeting. The glow of the fluorescent lights felt relentless, and with every second ticking past, anxiety thrummed in his chest. He could visualize each potential investor's face, their expressions inquisitive and skeptical. Steve stumbled through the PowerPoint presentation he'd prepared for the tech project. Each slide felt heavy, images of circuits and development plans intertwined with completely different focus, vulnerable stories of single fathers. He suddenly paused, gripping the table to anchor himself. As he wrestled with the presentation, he contemplated how he could pivot from facts and figures to profound narratives of resilience, weaving them into his pitch seamlessly. This was not merely a pitch about technology, it was about humanity, the crux of connection that could not be ignored. He envisioned leading with personal stories, sharing Jake's laughter, the challenges he faced as a father, and the motivating drive that brought him into the office every day. As the clock inched closer to the meeting, he leaned into his thoughts. The battle against societal expectations had led him here, ready to pitch an idea that celebrated single fatherhood, while also spotlighting their undeniable strength. In the boardroom, Clara's optimism infused him with energy. She had always believed in his vision. But as they prepared, dread stirred again. Would his heart resonate with an audience expecting numbers? Would they see the value in what he was trying to accomplish? The moment came as the door opened, revealing the investors with their imperfect smiles and expectant gazes. Suddenly, Steve felt less like an outsider and more like a torchbearer, the purpose of his campaign radiating into the room. What if I'm meant to redefine their perception, not just of fathers but of business itself? He pondered silently. As he stood up to begin, his throat dry and heart racing, he realized the stakes were higher than he ever dreamed. It was not just a meeting about his company's future, it was about honoring his identity and standing firm in a world that often belittled it. The moment of truth was at hand. He had to inspire them or risk losing everything he cared about. How would he begin to balance the technical with emotional truths, and could he break the barriers keeping single fathers and innovators from being equally recognized? The air in the conference room felt electric, charged with unspoken tension as Steve stood before the investors, his palms clammy against the cool surface of the podium. He glanced at Clara, who nodded reassuringly from her seat, reinforcing a sense of solidarity that buoyed his strength. He could dive into the statistics, show the forecasts that had become his safety net, but something deeper tugged at him, urging him to share a story of resilience. "Thank you for being here today," he started, surveying the investors who had assembled, their expressions unreadable. "What I'm about to share isn't just a business proposal, it's a journey. One that intertwines technology with the heartfelt realities of single fatherhood." His voice surprised him with its steadiness. As he unveiled the first slide, a photo of Jake laughing under a makeshift tent in their living room, it was as if the room itself shifted. Capturing these raw moments had become his way of seeking not just acknowledgement, but understanding. "I want to introduce you to my son, Jake. He's the reason I wake up every morning, not just to create a profitable business, but to build something that matters." He took a breath, committing to the truth he had long feared exposing. "As a single father, I've faced moments of despair and doubt. When life threw ridiculous challenges my way, I realized that my experiences could help others, just as technology could enhance those lifelines. He began to weave Jake's story into the narrative of the tech project. Software design not merely for innovation, but as a tool empowering single fathers to connect with resources, advice, and community. With each word, Steve felt a layer of himself peel away, revealing a raw vulnerability he had rarely embraced in business settings. Imagine a digital platform where single fathers can share their triumphs, struggles, and wisdom. This is an interactive space that fosters growth, support, and togetherness among a demographic often overlooked. He could see his words taking root, their faces softening slightly, curiosity igniting beyond skepticism. Suddenly, the specter of Matt's derision floated to the forefront of his mind, how he had dismissed stories as distractions from the bottom line. But now, as he was sharing his vision, he understood authenticity was his competitive edge. The blending of heartfelt narratives with robust technological solutions could forge a new pathway for both himself and the business. As he moved to the next slide, detailing projections that integrated emotional investments and market outreach, a palpable shift enveloped the room. The investors leaned in, shifting their posture from detached observers to engaged participants. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the reactions that breathed new life into his resolve. Would they really grasp the vision he was painting? Though the presentation had its challenges, a nagging fear still loomed. Would they see him as more than just a father? As someone capable of steering a tech venture that was equal parts emotional and rational? Would they dismiss his passion as weakness? Judgments had often been quick in this industry, propelled by old biases. Imagine this. Every engagement through our platform drives social change, creates community, and shatters the stigma surrounding single parenthood, all while generating profit. It felt daring to say, yet he pressed forward. The urgency coursing through him became a beacon of conviction. The presentation drew to a close, and as if on cue, a tension hung in the air, potent yet unyielding. He had shared more of himself than he intended, raw and revealing. But as the silence stretched, he realized that he was done hiding. Would they embrace a different form of leadership? Then, just before he sat down, an investor raised his hand. "Steve, how do you plan to bridge the gap between what you're presenting and the broader market?" The question pierced through the lingering anxiety, challenging him to expand on his vision. The moment teetered, the confidence he had rallied now felt fragile, resting upon his response. Could he maintain this delicate balance between personal stories and a compelling business strategy? The eyes in the room searched him, some ready to judge, others curious. Would this moment mark a pivotal shift, both for Steve and the future he hoped to create? The stakes were intensifying. Sometimes, the line between innovation and acceptance was razor thin. How would he answer the man with a mission versus the entrepreneur with a profit margin? The silence in the conference room morphed into a tangible weight as Steve gathered his thoughts. The challenge posed by the investor resonated in his chest, quickening his pulse. He could almost hear Matt's voice in the back of his mind, skewering passion and sentiment as distractions. Still, doubt nagged at the edges of his conviction. Somehow, he needed to find a way to pique the investor's appetite for something deeper. "Bridging that gap starts with understanding the true value of our community," Steve replied, his voice steadying with each word. "We don't just want to exist in the market, we intend to reflect its needs. By anchoring our platform in real experiences shared by single fathers, we can foster relatability. This isn't merely functionality, it's about creating meaningful connections that resonate with our audience. We'll prioritize user feedback at every phase of development." The investor nodded, and a flicker of interest sparked in his eyes. Steve realized that he needed to draw from his own experiences further. He reflected on the nights spent learning to juggle work and parenting, moments that had left him feeling splendidly lost but ultimately shaped who he'd become. "I remember a time last year when Jake came to me, excited about a project for his school. He rushed through the house, explaining how he wanted to design a model that represented teamwork. As his enthusiasm unfolded, it hit me, without connection, progress falters. That's precisely the dynamic we aim to harness through our platform." Each word felt invigorating as he envisioned Jake's proud face. He continued, "We are building something grounded in shared experiences. Every father who interacts with our platform will become a storyteller, contributing insights that others can learn from. Our application will link these stories with local resources, helping these men overcome hurdles in ways that transcend technology. The room, once suffused with skepticism, now buzzed with intrigue. Steve felt his confidence rebuilding brick by brick. Feedback? He knew it was the metaphorical lifeblood of any enterprise, and here was a moment to demonstrate that principle directly. He had the potential to wire in the personal stories he'd once believed to be insignificant. But then a darker thought edged in: how would he contain his narrative? Would the focus fall too heavily on individual stories and neglect the numbers that mattered? The loneliness of being a single parent threatened to resurface. As vulnerable as that basement he often retreated to during challenging nights. Wouldn't he allow fear a foothold now? He had too much to gain and too many stakes already laid on the table. An investor chimed in. What about user acquisition? How do we ensure these fathers are engaged and willing to share? The question was wise, one Steve had anticipated but had postponed addressing until now. Bursts of strategies flooded his mind: partnerships with parenting organizations, leveraging social media for grassroots campaigns, conducting webinars featuring industry experts that spoke to fatherly challenges. The possibilities expanded, each connection igniting a spark of excitement within him. I envision a user-friendly onboarding process that emphasizes community over transaction, Steve replied, eager to infuse optimism into his pitch. Imagine early adopters as ambassadors, promoters activated to share personalized stories within their networks. Their narratives will drive organic growth, transforming our platform into a thriving ecosystem. And we will make sure that the analytics reflect authentic engagement. His voice strained as he concluded, but he bore the weight of his aspirations. The dialogue had evolved. They were no longer just potential investors but partners in something profound. Leaving his comfort zone, he recognized a valuable lesson: vulnerability wasn't synonymous with weakness. It was a catalyst for innovation. As the investors exchanged murmurs of approval, Steve perceived a shift in their energy, a dawning realization that this project could be more than a mere app. Perhaps this was a moment of rebirth for him, too, a pivotal leap toward balanced professional success laced with the personal narratives that defined him. Yet, just as optimism began to solidify, an unsettling thought loomed. Would they be willing to navigate this uncharted territory alongside him, or would they retreat, trapped in the confines of traditional metrics and biases? The stakes remained as precariously poised as before, even as he caught glimpses of hope. With all eyes fixed on him, Steve felt the pressure amplify, the day teetering between promise and peril. Would his instincts lead him to a breakthrough or a bubble burst? The atmosphere crackled with questions left unanswered, the promise of transformation hanging thick in the air. What would his next move be in this delicate dance between innovation and acceptance? As Steve awaited the investor's response, the tension twisted within him like a tightly coiled spring. Every second felt like an hour. He had taken a risk, stripped bare his vulnerability, choosing the emotional, rather than purely logical, route to forge a bond. What if it wasn't enough? Suddenly, one of the investors leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Your idea is compelling, and you have a clear vision. But tell me, what happens when accommodating the emotional side overshadows the business fundamentals? Can you maintain profitability while staying true to this narrative-driven model? The question burrowed deep into Steve's psyche, igniting an internal debate. He knew that striking the right balance between emotional depth and financial metrics was essential, but the fear of straying too far into sentimentality haunted him. This wasn't merely a job, it was the embodiment of his journey as a father and an entrepreneur. Would he sacrifice that authenticity at the altar of cold, hard data? He took a measured breath, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished conference table. What we're proposing isn't a trade-off, it's a new model of engagement, he replied, his voice stronger than he felt. By intertwining emotional connection with our business plan, we create an ecosystem of advocates rather than mere users. The value these connections bring can translate into customer loyalty, retention, and ultimately, revenue growth. But doubts crept in again. Was he merely painting a rosy picture? He experienced a rush, a surge of adrenaline that bore a fascinating resemblance to fear. It occurred to him that perhaps this was where growth lay, not just for the company, but for him. The juxtaposition of wisdom and naivety, hope and skepticism, made him realize he was at a critical crossroad. As if reading his thoughts, another investor challenged him. Have you considered potential pushback from investors who demand immediate returns? What will you do when they question your prioritization of emotional engagement over financial metrics? The stakes elevated with each probing question. His heart raced, and in that moment he confronted the truth. This endeavor cut to his core. He would not waver. Not again. If he had learned anything, it was that meaningful connections were not ephemeral luxuries, but rather the backbone of sustainable success. I understand the desire for immediate returns, Steve said, meeting the skeptic's gazes with resolve. But if we succeed in building a community that thrives on shared experiences, that loyalty could manifest in ways traditional metrics fail to capture. We might find ourselves gaining traction in areas we hadn't initially foreseen. The atmosphere shifted again. Steve sensed a flicker of acknowledgement from the investors, perhaps even curiosity. Could the path he was proposing redefine not just the market, but what it meant to be a single father navigating this journey in more than one way? This conviction propelled him forward, fueled by something deeper than ambition. It was a pulse of purpose igniting the core of his identity. Still, shadows loomed in the recesses of his thoughts. If faced with resistance, could he hold firm to this vision? Would he need to make compromises that might betray the very essence of his platform? As those questions echoed, Steve realized he was actually wrestling with an uncomfortable truth: his own capacity to withstand conflict, not only in this room but in the larger scheme of life. As the investors shared a meaningful glance, Steve's mind raced ahead, crafting contingencies and strategies for what could come next, each idea sharper and clearer, yet fraught with risk. He knew now that he was dancing on the edge of possibility, a precipice decorated with the potential for greatness or disaster, and just when the collective energy seemed to align towards belief, a voice broke through: "If we take the leap together, how will you navigate the inevitable challenges in maintaining this focus on community while scaling?" The inquiry hung heavily in the air, stirring a storm as his heart pounded with revelation. The decision to step into untested waters was now more than mere ambition. It had become a battle for self-acceptance. Would he be able to safeguard his narrative's integrity without sacrificing growth? The meeting had transformed into a battleground of his personal ethos and the impending corporate reality. As he sat poised for an answer, he felt the weight of an entire future pivoting before him, each choice a reflection of who he was becoming. Would he rise to the occasion and face the looming storm head-on, or would he falter when the stakes couldn't be higher? Steve's mind raced with the implications of the investor's question, echoing across the chambers of his consciousness like the cold clang of a warning bell. The weight of his responsibilities tugged at him, threatening to pull him under. Gone were the echoes of childhood laughter that reminded him of simpler times. Now, they were replaced by the critical need to chart a course through uncharted waters both for his business and for his son. He knew that investors cared about numbers. They measured success in profit margins and quarterly reports. Yet, what if his narrative, shaped by love and struggle, was precisely the ingredient that would set them apart in a crowded marketplace? The thought struck him with a surge of clarity. What if this challenge was his proving ground, the very crucible in which his resolve would be hardened? Opening his mouth, he began to articulate a vision that extended beyond basic revenue, a framework where loyalty was measured not just in numbers but in genuine human connection. He could see his son's face in every interaction, every moment of understanding and empathy that he yearned to impart. "I appreciate the concern for profitability," he began, his resolve crystallizing with each word. "But the true question we should consider is this: how often do we, as consumers, choose a brand solely because it's convenient? The emotional narrative here isn't just a nice to have, it's essential. If we invest in building a community that aligns with our values, we unlock a loyalty that goes beyond mere transactions." The silence that followed was electric, charged with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. He watched as the investors shifted in their seats, the tide of their expressions revealing a spark of interest, a vital sign that he wasn't sailing alone. Steve pressed on, his voice steady and confident as the room's air thickened with potential. This model isn't merely a marketing strategy. It is the bedrock of our company's identity. I want our customers to feel seen and heard, as I do with my son. When they connect with our brand on that emotional level, they advocate for us, and that advocacy is worth its weight in gold. A quick glance at the lead investor confirmed what he hoped to convey. He was capturing their attention. A flicker of recognition danced in the investor's eye, hinting he was beginning to see the melding of narrative with fiscal reality. However, doubt still lingered in Steve's mind like a distant storm cloud. What if they turned away? What if his competitors, who relied solely on hard numbers, surged ahead of him, while he took a stand for something seemingly intangible? A wave of anxiety washed over him, stirring memories of moments when his personal battles felt insurmountable. He couldn't afford to be disheartened now, not when he stood at such a critical threshold. The investor's voice broke through his reverie. It's a compelling argument, but real-world data is essential. Can you provide us with examples of similar models that resulted in sustainable growth? This was his moment. He had anticipated this question, and with a deep, grounding breath, he shared real-world success stories that exemplified the marriage of emotional engagement and profitability. He recounted companies that had thrived not only through adept marketing but by creating spaces where customers genuinely belong. Each example spun a web of possibility that resonated with the hopes he carried for his venture. But as Steve elaborated, a separate thought clawed at the edges of his focus. Could he protect this vision as they scaled? The balance between emotional integrity and growth felt as tenuous as fragile glass. What if he wasn't equipped to navigate the pressures ahead? Each potential decision loomed larger than before, as if the future demanded more than mere strategy. It required unwavering faith and gritty perseverance. In the midst of forwarding an argument towards acceptance, he recognized something painful yet liberating. Embracing vulnerability might actually be his greatest strength. He was not just a single father. He was a man passionate about crafting a legacy, one that honored both his entrepreneurial spirit and the love he had for his son. Glimpsing their skepticism shift slightly towards respect, he knew how fragile the moment could be. He also carried the weight of an undeniable question in the depths of his mind. If he succeeded today, what would it mean for his identity as a father? Would stepping boldly into this venture enable him to shape the life he wanted both for his business and his son? Just then, another investor leaned forward, breaking the spell of contemplation. Let's say we were to move forward. What would this look like in the next year? Can you outline the first steps in this scaling process? Steve paused, heart racing as the gravity of the moment washed over him again. Would he deliver a plan that encompassed the emotional heart, the very aspect the investors seemed hesitant to embrace? Or would he retreat to more traditional metrics, fearing the repercussions of his convictions? With breath yet unsteady, he prepared to articulate not just a route, but a vision of possibility that required everything he had, revealing a truth he had held in the secret chambers of his heart. Would he fray at the seams when confronted with reality, or would he weave a new path, not just for himself but for those who would follow? The moment was closing in, and he felt the urgency tighten around him, pressing for clarity and process in the face of unknown challenges ahead. Steve felt the weight of their gaze, a palpable pressure fueling both apprehension and ambition. This moment was pivotal. It wasn't merely about numbers on a spreadsheet, nor was it just an opportunity to secure investment. It was a definitive step towards defining his legacy, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a father who wanted nothing more than to build a brighter future for his son. He took a deep breath, inverting the tension pooling in his throat into something constructive. In the next year, our focus will be twofold. He laid out his plan, each point crystallizing in his mind as he spoke. First, we will implement a series of targeted marketing campaigns that emphasize our core values: trust, community, and connection. These campaigns will humanize our brand and create spaces for dialogue between us and our customers. As he spoke, he visualized the connections, the warm smiles and shared stories he wanted to cultivate, much like the bond he shared with his son. Wouldn't these relationships ultimately drive loyalty far deeper than any flash-in-the-pan discount promotions? Secondly, we'll establish feedback loops. He continued, feeling more grounded with each syllable. I want our customers to feel that their voices matter, to see our brand evolve as a product of their input. We're not merely selling products, we're fostering relationships. With every word, confidence began to replace the nervous flutter in his chest. He could sense that the investors were intrigued. He had transformed his trepidation into a strategic framework that extolled not just analytics but also authenticity. Then came the crunch of reality. Sharing his vision wasn't enough, it demanded execution, and that meant assembling the right team. What if they weren't ready to embrace this paradigm? What if they succumbed to traditional anxieties about customer satisfaction? His mind raced through scenarios, doubts clashing violently against his emerging hope. One of the investors, an older man with a discerning stare, raised an eyebrow. Great ideas, Steve. But how will we measure these relationships? KPIs are still vital for our board. How can you assure us that this strategy translates into financial returns? Steve felt the sharpness of that challenge. He could either succumb to the urge to backpedal, retracting his assertion that emotions could hold monetary value, or he could lean in even further. I see metrics not merely as barriers, but as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of connection. We can track customer engagement through social interactions, monitor retention rates as a measure of loyalty, and use customer satisfaction scores as qualitative data. He could see them absorbing his words, dissecting his argument, and he knew that a seismic shift was occurring. Yet doubts still lurked, growing almost tangible. What if his vision failed to resonate beyond the confines of this room? The echo of the investor's skepticism threatened to drown out the fire igniting within him. The investors began murmuring among themselves, deliberating faster than he could analyze the content of their discussions. He felt the space around him compress, and it echoed the pounding in his chest. As fear clawed at the edges of his resolve, he sensed the urgency and recognized an inherent truth. The best ideas often emerge through the din of uncertainty. Building a brand on these principles is a risk, he said, addressing them directly, but aren't the most transformative journeys often filled with uncertainty? I'm not here to sell you a fail-proof model, but a compelling narrative tethered to real experiences. Silence fell across the room, thick and pregnant with possibility. Steve braced himself for their reactions, aware that he had unleashed a part of him previously cloaked in insecurity. Here was the crux. Would the investors align with his vision, or would they retreat to the comfortable arms of traditional metrics? The lead investor's face was inscrutable, and the minutes felt like hours. The silence cracked open only for another investor to speak, her voice slicing through the tension. Then let us imagine this. What happens if you pivot? If maintaining this balance between loyalty and data proves insurmountable? Steve swallowed hard. The question hung audaciously, a double-edged sword laced with fear. If he pivoted, what would that mean for his identity, his leading vision? Would he unwittingly betray his principles? In that moment, clarity washed over him. To pivot wasn't to retreat, it was to adapt in order to forge ahead. He nodded slowly, allowing fresh resolve to settle within him. If that moment arises, I will engage our community, integrate their experiences into our structure, even if it means recalibrating our approach without compromising our core values. At this admission, he felt a shift, the acknowledgement that flexibility could coexist with steadfast principles. Today was not just about securing investments, but presenting a paradigm of resilience. He realized that one truth stood firm above all else. His deepest convictions were compelling enough to anchor both personal and professional waters as they roiled unpredictably. Yet, even as he expertly navigated the unfamiliar territory, a deeper internal conflict capitulated at the surface, the undeniable truth that financial urgency and emotional authenticity exist in a perplexing dance. Each step a challenge, and every misstep fraught with consequence. The lead investor gestured, a signal to the others. Steve braced for the decision that would either solidify his path forward or shatter his fragile foundation. What would their choice reveal about him? And would it catapult the vision he had birthed, or would it trap him in the shadow of conventionality? The moment lingered, poised on the precipice of decision, and as numbers and narratives grasped at one another in a desperate tussle, He felt the closing words in his head waiting to be voiced. But would he utter the truth that loomed heavy in his heart, or would he hold it close, a secret too raw to share? The tension in the room was so thick it felt almost suffocating. Steve could hear the murmurs echoing in his mind, the uncertainty intermingled with self-doubt swirling around him. He had poured everything into that presentation, each idea crafted from his deepest convictions. But would it hold up under the scrutiny of cold, hard reality? As the investors conferred quietly, Steve's thoughts raced through a storm of potential outcomes. He envisioned their faces turning away in disinterest, or worse, the judgment in their eyes reflecting a society that valued analytics and profit margins above all else. The fear was palpable, creeping in like a shadow that threatened to engulf his ambitions. But alongside that fear, something deeper began to stir, a determination rooted in his desire to succeed not just for himself, but for his son. He shifted in his seat, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety boiling within. What would happen if they chose to walk away? What if all his efforts were for naught? Yet, the thought of retreat was equally painful. Steve had committed to a vision, one that transcended mere profit. He wasn't just trying to secure funding. He was attempting to forge a legacy, an enterprise built on meaningful connections with those whom they served. The older investor, with the discerning stare, broke the silence, saying, "Steve, it sounds like you're willing to play a dangerous game. How can we trust that you won't abandon the foundational aspects of our business simply to chase intangible feelings?" That question struck a nerve. It was as if he could feel the walls closing in, and yet another fear crept in. What if he was chasing a dream that would never see the light of day? Could he stand firm when challenged, or would he fold under the pressure of their skepticism? Gathering himself, he cleared his throat. "Trust is built over time," he replied, the words radiating from somewhere deep within him, crafting a tangibility from the abstract notions swirling in his mind. "I understand the stakes, but relying solely on KPIs disregards the humanity in business. Loyalty, engagement, community, they've never had a real metric, yet they loom large in the success of any venture." A flicker of intrigue sparked in the lead investor's eyes, and Steve seized this opening. "Our goal is not just to sell a product. It's to create a relationship. If you think about it, every successful brand from Apple to Nike has built an emotional narrative around their products. They invite customers into an experience, rather than offering a mere transaction." He felt his confidence surge, lifting him like air filling a balloon. Words flowed more freely now, fueled by a sense of purpose, as he connected the dots between emotional engagement and financial stability. "Wouldn't it be more beneficial for us to understand how our customers feel about our brand? Their trust can be our strongest asset." But as he spoke, another doubt slinked its way into his mind. Had he bitten off more than he could chew? The boldness of his words left him naked in front of them. If he didn't succeed, the repercussions would ripple across his life, entwining his role as a father into the failure of his professional aspirations. Yet he recognized a pivot within himself. This could be a moment of profound clarity, a chance to claim his authenticity. Suddenly, the climate shifted. The investors ceased their whispering, and those intent gazes turned back to him, heavy with scrutiny. Each face was a mask of consideration, and the stakes seemed to hang in the balance, delicately poised. "What you're proposing is indeed an uphill climb, but it's refreshing to hear someone emphasize connection," said the lead investor slowly, gauging Steve's reaction. "If we take this route, there are risks, yes. What will you do if your customers don't rise to the occasion? If the emotional investment doesn't yield the anticipated returns?" As that question hung in the air, Steve's resolve began to crystallize, morphing into something fierce and unwavering. "Then we will learn," he asserted. "I will engage them in conversation. I will adapt and recalibrate, aligning our brand with their needs without losing sight of our values." The stark realization ignited in him this journey could also become a canvas for growth, where lessons could transform setbacks into stepping stones. A path carved not merely from success but from resilience and authenticity. The sense of clarity navigated the nebulous doubts, allowing his vision to shine through the mixed emotions he navigated. Yet, as he battled the tides of uncertainty, the lingering fear of failure still wrapped tightly around his heart, its grip not yet relinquished. The finality of their decision loomed just overhead, like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Just then, the older investor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly as he contemplated Steve's proposition. "You seem passionate about this. It's brave to champion a cause not purely based on profit. But can you back that up? Show us not just your plan, but how you'll thrive amidst adversity. Convince us that you can withstand the pressure." Those words were an electrifying jolt, signaling an unexpected challenge, a test not just of his ideas but of his entire identity as a leader. Suddenly, the spotlight was brighter, and the weight of expectation pressed down thicker. Steve knew he had to summon every ounce of conviction, creativity, and resilience he possessed. The turning point awaited him, not just for his project, but for the legacy he hoped to build. And as he prepared to respond, one thought clawed at the edges of his mind, a realization that this moment was not only critical for his business but for the man he was becoming in the eyes of his son. Would he inspire a future with a legacy of bravery and authenticity, or would he falter under the pressures he once feared? With determination clashing against doubt, he took a deep breath, ready to confront this profound question that could either cement his vision or unravel it entirely. The moment of truth was at hand, and he felt the surge of potential ready to explode. Steve stood at the precipice of transformation, facing the investors with a resolve fueled by his real journey as a father. The dialogue pulsated in the room, reframing the stakes in ways he could never have imagined. This wasn't merely a pitch, this was his chance to reclaim his narrative. He cleared his throat, grounding himself as he prepared to articulate his commitment. Failures will happen. In business, in parenting, in life. But it's how we rise from them, how we learn, and who we become in the process that defines success, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. The echoes of his journey as a CEO resonated in his proclamation, each word laced with conviction. He felt a surge of confidence intermingle with the fear. After all, he had been fighting that battle since the moment Jake entered his life. "I envision our platform as a living project," he continued, an urgency building within him. "It will pivot and adapt, evolving through the voices of our community. If our initial attempts fall short, we will conduct surveys, gather insights, and turn those lessons into actionable strategies." The weight of those words settled like a cloak of empowerment. Acknowledgement from the room shifted in a palpable way. He had anchored his vision in resilience, a value inherent to his role as both a father and a leader. The leap he had taken to expose his vulnerability had crafted a silver lining. It wasn't just about financial success but redefining what success meant for him and other fathers like him. The lead investor scrutinized him intensely, the question lingering in the air like a tantalizing challenge. "You've clearly put thought into this. But what subsequent steps assure us of your commitment to accountability?" In that moment, Steve knew he had illuminated a crucial truth. "This isn't just about me anymore," he conceded, a sense of liberation washing over him. "It's about all the single fathers out there. They deserve to feel seen and valued. That authenticity will carry through every aspect of our engagement strategy, our design, and our growth metrics." He could see the nods among the investors, their expressions gradually evolving into mutual respect rather than mere skepticism. Steve had demonstrated an understanding of their concerns. He could translate emotional capital into compelling value, one which did not shy away from the hard realities of business. His voice grew bolder as he continued to articulate his framework. "We will set metrics that track not only traditional KPIs but also qualitative measures of customer satisfaction, engagement, and community expansion. We can build analytics dashboards that assess how engaged users are not just with the technology but with one another, how they share their stories and triumphs. That will be our real success, building a connected community." With every moment that passed, Steve could feel the spirit of innovation cradling his ideas. There was clarity now, like light breaking through clouds after a storm. These investors were no longer just indifferent faces. They became potential allies, a part of his vision. By shifting the arc of the conversation towards shared humanity, Steve saw an opportunity for collaborative growth. And whether we face pushback or resistance, I'm prepared to mitigate fears through transparency, he asserted. By demonstrating that community engagement translates into measurable success over time, we will prove the potential profitability of our endeavors. The silence felt charged, electric, and Steve sensed that he was on the cusp of meaningful acknowledgement. His vulnerability was a bridge that connected him to every part of his journey. It transformed their understanding. Yes, this is a risk, he willingly admitted, but it's one I've already taken in my life as a single father. It's personal. I want to build something for my son and all the sons and daughters out there who may feel like they don't fit into the traditional mold of family. Let us build a legacy where everyone has a voice, irrespective of their circumstances. One of the investors spoke. Again, nodding slowly, a thoughtful expression across his face. You make a compelling case, Steve. It's refreshing to see someone who is ready to merge business acumen with emotional authenticity. But it's a delicate balance. Exactly, Steve affirmed, the fervor igniting within him. And that's the beauty of being prepared to adapt, to listen. Just as I redefined my role as a father amidst the challenges, this project will redefine what it means to build a business in the 21st century. Steve sensed the shift the room had transformed into a space of possibility. They were not merely assessing his pitch, but had come to understand his genuine intent. The barriers that once felt insurmountable shimmered with potential. A moment of silence lingered before a grin crept across the lead investor's face. Here's what I propose. Let us take this idea further. We'll partner on a pilot program, track its performance, and analyze results together every step of the way. If we see growth and engagement, then we will happily explore investments to scale from there. That was the breakthrough moment, the culmination of months of grappling with fear, uncertainty, and conviction. Steve felt the walls of anxiety that had previously trapped him dissipate. An exhilarating sense of freedom washed over him. He had not only secured investor interest but had also conveyed the strength and importance of his journey, the necessity of its authenticity. It was a victory grounded in the unyielding resolve to forge a legacy of resilience, compassion, and a new definition of family that encompassed every challenge. Walking out of that meeting, Steve felt lighter, imbued with a powerful sense of achievement. He had not only stepped into a new realm of professional validation, but also regained his identity as a devoted father. He was no longer battling stigma alone. He had transformed his pain into something palpable, hopeful, and worth fighting for. The narrative he had crafted would reverberate not just through the world of tech, but in every heart that felt overlooked, every father who had been underestimated. Now, with his vision brought to light, he could create space for others to share their stories, to find community, and to thrive. And in that genuine place of understanding, he rediscovered the strength of his journey, one of unyielding love and unwavering resilience. This was only the beginning. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help this narrative reach others. Comment your reactions and theories about this pivotal conclusion. Your thoughts matter. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful journey of transformation.